It's like I talk with my clients a lot about this phraseology of it's an event that happened to you, but it doesn't own you anymore. And there's a big difference in that. When they walk into my office, they are owned by what is going on. Their body is running the show. They're in fight or flight mode. They are in survival all the time. They leave and they're not owned anymore.
Welcome back to the No Foot Too Small podcast. My name is Jackie Selsky, and I'm your host for today. And we have an extra special guest on in honor of Self-Care Month. And so, we're all about breaking down stigma here, and that doesn't have to be just around conversations related to pregnancy and infant loss. I think there's a lot of stigma around what self-care looks like and what healing looks like. And so we're going to deep dive into that conversation today with Laurel Weirs, who is a licensed family and marriage counselor and an expert in trauma recovery. And I want to emphasize that word recovery because her whole mission is just making sure that people live their lives well and heal. And so her mission is beautiful. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Laurel personally and connecting with her on a pretty deep level. And so I'm really excited to share her heart with you today. So thank you, Laurel, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
I am too. And I have to call you out. I know as we're recording this, it is your birthday. So I just want to say happy birthday because it is a big deal to take time out of a special day. And I just want to honor that gift that you're giving us. So thank you again for
Absolutely.
that. So tell me a little bit about yourself. And, we recently interviewed a grief expert and, how does somebody get into the study of grief, right? I'd love to just know what led you to the career that you have today and really this focus on trauma.
Sure. Well, yeah, a lot of people wonder that because I don't think you always set out and say, oh, I'm so excited to deal with PTSD. It's really in the therapist community. I can't say it's something that in the beginning people were excited to work with. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that typically talk therapists are overwhelmed by it, don't know what to do with it. So I've been a clinician for 25 years. And for the first 17 or so, I really didn't work with PTSD very much. I started out my career actually doing like a lot of people working with teenagers and children. I was young. So they all want the young one, right? All the kids and teenagers, and went through a couple phases in my career. Initially, I actually worked with a lot of self-mutilation and people that were cutting. I had a lot of teenagers with that. And then from there, moved into, I would call the second phase of my clinician career, where I wrote a book about infidelity, where I was really struggling seeing people not knowing how to deal with it or getting the help that they needed. Being a marriage and family therapist, the mistake most people make is when people come in with infidelity, they do marriage counseling, not infidelity counseling. So after having a bunch of botched cases that landed in my office, hoping to get some help, I was like, oh, I got to write a book on this. Like people need to know how to deal with it. And so then I spent, I would say, another portion of my career really working with that. But then the trauma piece came, which I never saw it coming. All I knew was that if you had PTSD, I was not the clinician for you. I would send you out to somebody in the community that I knew or thought could help you. And then I was injured and I was laid up in bed and I was watching a television show and it was a bunch of veterans and they were sharing how they were actually healing from PTSD. Now, at this point, I didn't think it was really possible. I thought, okay, I can support you. Therapists can support you. We can be there for you, but pretty much your life is going to be maybe mediocre at best for the most part because you have this diagnosis. I really was not hopeful that there could be transformation and change. And when I heard these men talking, I thought, wow, whatever they're doing, I've got to learn this. So within a month, I was trained in the first of many modalities now, and it was called Accelerated Resolution Therapy. And I did a 3-day training and went back, and it was like nothing I had ever done before. This modality really changes the way your brain stores the images and sensations associated with the events that create PTSD. Now, this was not talk therapy. This was not having people rehash and recount things. It was using methods with bilateral stimulation, which just means putting eyes moving back and forth or tapping on people to get both sides of their body stimulated, to get their brain talking to each other. And then having them do this entire protocol that by the end of the session, they could recount the facts, but they no longer saw the images or felt the sensations the same way. And this was so important because it removed triggering. And when you can remove triggers and when you can calm the nervous system, your experience in life is completely different. In a sense, you get a reset to who you were before those events happened. So I went back into my office and started seeing people with this. And it was amazing. Like my first couple sessions, I was like, oh, this is so different than talk therapy. I have no idea if this is going to work. You're like crossing your fingers, crossing your toes, holding your breath. And then you get the call. And they're like, oh my gosh, I just drove by the scene of the accident completely fine. I just went, heard the song that I heard when I found out, someone was cheating, or drove by the hotel where I found out my husband was cheating, or you name it. And they were completely calm, able to engage in life in a way again that the triggering had stopped. And it made me an addict. I was like, if this is possible, like bring it on. And I started to run towards trauma. And so that's what I did for the first couple of years. And then I started to train clinicians in the modality because I thought if I can only help these many people, I'm one person, then I need to train other clinicians because we need to exponentially change the world. And so I loved that. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved into kind of the phase I'm in now, which is finding that not only can we work with trauma using these modalities, but we can also just improve people's ability to function in life with things that are not traumatic using the same methods. So I've created my own method at this point that I use called Mint. And that's how I arrived here.
Yeah, no, gosh, there's a lot to unpack in that journey for you. And I'm really excited to dive into your specific method a little bit. But I want to back up and just kind of go through how do you define trauma? Okay, so No Foot Too Small serves families who've experienced pregnancy or infant loss. And, I think there's a fine line for many of us lost parents of, is that a trauma in our life? Mm-hmm. What is the word that we would use to define it? And I think that's different for all of our families, right? But in reality, it is a traumatic event. Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to just hear kind of your definition of trauma as you are helping people navigate these experiences.
So I love that you brought that up because this comes up all the time. This is the reason that most people discount themselves from getting help. They say, well, I went through something difficult, but it wasn't trauma. So therefore, I don't have PTSD. So therefore, I need to just kind of suck it up and figure it out and toughen up and get through this. So I don't even use the word trauma. I've started to just use the words negative life events. Because when you use that, people allow themselves into the conversation. They don't shut off and they start to say, well, maybe that is what I experienced. So yes, when you've had loss, infant loss, pregnancy loss, that's traumatic. Mm-hmm. I consider that trauma. So for me, trauma is not the event. And Gabor Mate talks about this all the time, but it's the impact and the imprint that it leaves upon your mind, your brain, and your body. It's the psychological, imprinting that happens from an event, whether the world calls it trauma or whether we call it a negative life event because the world doesn't consider it trauma. And we don't have to go into the topics of big T trauma versus little t trauma, but just knowing that everybody calls it something different. But any event that has high, intense emotionality, right? Regardless of what anyone outside of you thinks about it, that leaves a mark. And if we are a changed person from who we were before that event to who we are after that event, that is what I consider a trauma.
I think that probably hits the nail on the head for many of our families and helps articulate what a lot of them are feeling. Just something is different in my life now after the loss of my child. And it's hard to put words to that. And I'm really grateful that you articulated the emotional, spiritual, psychological side of trauma, because this is why I was really excited to invite you for Self-Care Month in particular. I think when, we host over 100 support groups throughout the year for families who've experienced loss. And so we're big believers in healing in community. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about today are acronyms and alternative therapies that our families talk a lot about in our groups. But I want to be clear that, the complexity of a negative life event, right? We created a human and a life, and that is a positive. The loss is the negative, and there's a lot of complexity in that. And without getting deep into that, I think what I really want to cover today is the way that experience manifests in the body, in that mind-body connection, in those other ways that maybe we're not recognizing, right? And I've heard you speak on this before. It kind of becomes a filter through which we experience everything else in our life going forward. And so how do we take ownership of what that filter looks like? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about just how does trauma or negative life events manifest in the body over time when we are not dealing with it?
Mm-hmm. So the thing that I focus on the most are the triggers, right? And the way that your body is reacting in a moment when it's presented with something that you consciously or unconsciously have connected to that negative life event, right? So when it comes to loss, a lot of what I see is that people will come in and, right, they know that every time somebody announces that they got pregnant, right, they just have this feel in their body and, they're trying to fight off the tears. Or it's after the loss trying to get pregnant again, and every time you get your period, right? And that you can't, conceive again. So, and it's the same emotional reaction, right? Whether it's tears or whether it's panic or whether it's your heart racing or in your stomach or in your gut, you're having some reaction to something that you're thinking, why am I getting so upset about this? Right? This is normal. I'm getting my period, or I should be so happy for my sister-in-law. She's pregnant. And so the way that it manifests is that new filter. Now you have this memory, you have this moment in time that has not been completely integrated because it was a big event. And even though you've talked about it and it's been time does not heal all wounds. That is such a myth. You're still not over it. And so the way that happens is that your body is saying, ooh, this is hitting something that feels familiar, but you don't realize it. And so when you hear that announcement about that pregnancy, if you were to sit there and say, what am I feeling in my body right now? A lot of people, if they just pause, they'll go, oh, I feel what I felt on that day when I lost my child, right? So that shows us that this is the connection point where there still needs to be some integration of that memory set. And the fact that you're being triggered, it's your body saying, there's still a little bit more work to do here. Time has not gotten rid of this. And even though you've talked about it and you've shared about it and you've been in groups and try as you might to be so excited and to say, I shouldn't be selfish. I shouldn't make this about me. I need to be excited about my sister-in-law's pregnancy. It just doesn't happen. That's an indication that we need to attend a little bit more to what's going on.
I think it's highlighting something that we talk a lot about at No Fit Too Small, is this idea that joy and grief can coexist in a beautiful way. And I think with pregnancy loss in particular, right, we don't ever want to get over it. We don't want to forget that life existed, but we do want to find a way to move forward in a healthy way and still show up for ourselves, for our families, for our living children, and whatever that may look like for each of us. And so I think it's beautiful that what you're talking about is really the experience can still exist for us. It's just the way that our body responds to it is a little lighter so that we can keep moving about the world with our best selves, I think is really beautiful to think about it that way.
Yes. It's amazing when you can start to take these moments that your brain just still wants you to pay attention to. There is a levity and a lightness once they've been processed. And people just think, well, this is grief. It should feel this way. Yes, grief is different for everybody, and grief can be heavy. And there are times that it's just grief. And that's the question that people should start asking. Is this grief or is this a little bit more? Because the worst thing is to think that this is just a normative process and this is how it has to be. And so I talk with people a lot about that. I will say, okay, I understand that you're having grief, but tell me about that day, right? And tell me what happened. And when you can start to see that the system is getting super dysregulated, people are still having a hard time, looking at a certain color, hearing a certain song when the date comes up. That's not a bad thing, but wouldn't it be nice to be able to honor the life that you lost, but without you getting so dysregulated that you have to go into bed for 12 hours that day, or that you can't go to work that day, or that you're not able to function in the way that you need to? And those are the things that are great to start poking at, which is what's normative, right? And what's just the grief cycle, and what's, ooh, I'm getting stuck because I have some memories that might need to be integrated. And there's things that I could do that could make this just a little bit lighter so that I can function while I'm continuing to process my grief without being stuck and paralyzed.
I think you touched on something really important in our community because, we're on a mission to reduce stigma around these conversations for a reason, because our society is not set up to really support families returning to normal life after loss. And so we know statistically that, the majority of families who experience loss feel isolated. They feel anxious about returning to work. Only 1 in 3 workplaces has anything formal set up to support somebody who's experienced a miscarriage or a stillbirth. And, most of those parents feel pressured to return to work too quickly. And so I think there is this element in pregnancy and infant loss in particular of where we feel rushed to go back to the real world, especially if we have other people in our family we have to immediately support, and we have other children in the home and a spouse. And, we don't get to pause and really process, I think, what has happened. I've never thought about how different maybe that experience is than I think everybody can understand a car accident or being part of, a kind of more common, I don't know how you would say that, but maybe a less stigmatized negative event. I think the world looks at us and understands why we're responding the way we are differently than when we're talking about pregnancy and infant loss. And so I think the way you touched on that is really important for us to consider in our community too, because I think we have a lot of, I like how you said big T, little t trauma, because it's something we want to change and normalize in the conversation too, is all loss is loss. There's not a worse loss, and the worst loss is your own. So we don't want to minimize any. And, I do want to ask you, we talk a lot about PTSD, and I think there are probably common symptoms of what that is, but I would imagine a lot of people don't have a formal diagnosis of PTSD. So is there hope for those of us who don't have a formal diagnosis, or what does that look like? Or what advice do you have for those of us who maybe, don't know if we have that? How do we identify if that's something that we're experiencing and maybe should dig a little deeper?
And to have a trauma response doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have that diagnosis, right, of PTSD. And so I'm glad that you're asking that question, because some people might say, well, what turns it into that? And so this is the way I look at things. Anything that's disrupting your ability to function in life, that's a problem. So whether it's that you keep having nightmares about what's going on, whether you're having middle of the night waking and you can't fall back asleep, that identifies that we've got a cortisol spike going on, which means that your body is still under a lot of stress. Whether you're having headaches and you just can't get rid of them, lack of energy, inability to socialize the way that you used to, right? Depression starts to settle in. You don't enjoy the things that you used to, or you start avoiding things. You get super anxious when you're around certain people, right? When you start to deal with any type of a response from something that's a negative life event, you find that the way that you functioned before just starts to change. So a lot of it is even avoidance. It's avoidance of anything that reminds you of the negative event. And the problem is when we leave these moments untreated, those moments actually get bigger. So I'll have clients that come into me and they'll say to me, when this first happened, I couldn't, go to my sister's house who had a new baby, because I would constantly think she had the baby around the time I was supposed to. My child would have been thus and such an age at this point. But then what happens is it's like that area of avoidable moments starts to grow. And so it's whether it's conversations at work that happen, or whether it's certain sections of Target that you can't go into anymore. And before you know it, you're starting to have this avoidant behavior, because that's what we do. Our bodies don't like pain, so we like to stay away from it. But if we don't tend to the voice that's screaming over here saying, please pay attention to me, we have to integrate this memory, we have to process it a little bit more, you just end up avoiding more things so that you don't feel the pain. So I talk to a lot of people about that, noticing how their world, in a sense, has gotten smaller because of what's happened.
Mm. Oh gosh, yeah, I think that is hitting home for me personally. I think one of the reasons you and I connected is actually because we started talking about EMDR therapy, and I know I have gone through that. I have part of it was really successful for me, but there were a lot of experiences that it didn't touch for me, and so the triggers were really real and continued to be very real after that. And those were some of the questions I remember asking you the first night we met, and just why did it work in some parts and not the others? And EMDR is something that we talk a lot about in our groups. I think many of our parents have tried that, and you mentioned ART, and so I'd love for you to maybe just highlight what the heck are some of these therapies, these alternative therapies. I think talk therapy is pretty common. A lot of people will go that route first. But yeah, enlighten us on what else is out there, and especially the models that you really specialize in.
Sure. And that's such a good question too, because there's a lot of thinking for some people still that these things are woo-woo, right? If it's not talk therapy, like, what is it? Is it voodoo? Is it hypnosis? What are you doing? So I love to share with people the differences with all of them. So EMDR is a great modality. For EMDR, I like that you highlighted, well, how come I'm still having triggering with certain events and not everything? EMDR is great, but it can be a long process. You can spend quite a few sessions processing through just one emotion set, So let's say it's a death, right? You could spend a couple months processing all the things related to that, and then spend a couple months processing things related to a rough childhood home that you grew up in. And that it brings relief, but because it's more free associative, it can sometimes take a little bit longer. It's not as directive. So brings great relief. I use it all the time for deeper connection, especially when we have a lot of complex issues that have gone on over a long amount of time. The nice thing about it is it works, all these therapies that have bilateral stimulation that I'm going to talk about today, they work with a very natural process in your brain, which is called adaptive information processing. And what all these modalities do is they do what your brain does naturally. So none of this is voodoo. We're not making your brain do anything it doesn't normally do. Every night when you go to sleep, your brain is processing all the things that happen throughout the day, all the information that it took in. But when something's too big, your brain gets stuck in a sense. And then it keeps showing it to you, and you keep bumping up against it. So when you go into EMDR, what it's doing is you're manually saying, okay, brain, let's go through the process that you were supposed to go through when you were sleeping, but it hasn't happened. And it helps you integrate that memory into all the different neural networks, and that gets rid of the triggering. It brings that dysregulation down. You process out kind of the way that your body is holding it. And beautiful, but a little bit longer.
And it stands for
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Reprocessing. Okay, I couldn't remember what the R was. So, yep. Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
So that's great. It's very, very common, and a lot of people use it. Now, ART, I always refer to as EMDR on steroids. Now, ART is quick. It gets in, it gets out, and it's very specific. So, for example, a lot of times when you can find out where people are triggered, they will say to you, it's this moment I keep seeing. I keep going back to whatever moment it was in the loss that they had, or it was the hospital scene, or it was when they came home and had to walk in the nursery, whatever it is. And that is the distressing image that we have to get rid of. That's the part that your brain needs to process, that part of that memory. So accelerated resolution therapy, what it does is it's very directive, and it's a specific protocol. And within 60 to 90 minutes, by the end of that session, you will have integrated that memory set. And sometimes it's only one session, maybe two, and you will be able to then walk by that empty nursery or go into that hospital again and have zero dysregulation from it. So it's perfect it's quick, it gets in, it gets out, it helps clear and calm the nervous system, and it's 2 sessions. So people are like, sign me up.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right? And it's beautiful, but what I notice where its limitations are when we get into more complex issues. So when I created my modality, it really happened only out of me sensing that this modality worked really well here, but not here. And then this one works better here, not in this place. So I started to use them all together. And when I did that, it was like, oh, well, we can do both. I can get rid of those images and those sensations, or I can lead you into the process of getting rid of them while we're also doing all the integrative work that is cleaning up all the other moments that were lingering back there that have to do with the loss. Because the problem with accelerated resolution therapy is sometimes you might have, let's say, like 8 things, 8 moments. And do you really want to do 8 sessions of having to do that? Whereas sometimes you can just use EMDR and all 8 of those will get integrated together in one of those sessions. So they're both beautiful. I would encourage anybody to seek out either type of a clinician. If you can only find ART, go. If you can only get EMDR, do that. They are both wonderful. They're both great. They're going to bring relief, and they're just so different because they are going to do that lift in your nervous system. They're going to integrate the memory sets, and that's the stuff that's triggering you, and that's what your nervous system is hanging on to. And so run towards them.
And the nervous system is holding on to the visceral, physical response to that image, right? So the goal is not necessarily to forget the image. I mean, many of our families have one moment of time where they saw their child. And, you know, the goal is never to get rid of that memory of your child by any means, but it's, just want to clarify, it's to get rid of the way your body and your heart and your soul essentially are really responding to that memory, so that, you know, you are healthier and you are well as you're reliving those experiences and those memories. And they're beautiful, positive memories rather than disruptive, debilitating memories, right? I just want to make sure that I'm interpreting that correctly when we say get rid of it, because that might sound a little scary to some of the listeners, maybe.
So I'll clarify that. So your brain is only going to get rid of the moments that are distressing you. So if somebody feels positive about a moment where they can see that infant, that's not going to be the distressing piece. It's the other pieces around it, right? So they're not usually presenting to you the images that make them feel good. They're presenting to you the images that make them feel bad. So even if it's a sad moment, if that doesn't bring up negative feelings in the body, we're not doing anything with it. And it's interesting, the pieces that your brain shows you that are the distressing moments, right? And it's not necessarily the moment that you sat there holding your child, whether they had passed or for the moments that they were still alive. But what you're doing is you're getting rid of the parts that your brain shows you that are super difficult for you to see. And those pieces, you choose what you want to replace them with. So in one of the parts of one of these therapies, in accelerated resolution therapy, you get a moment to rewrite the moment. And the way that they do that is whatever your brain wants. And it's really beautiful. Some people will rewrite the moment that they are seeing their child, you know, in a different way, or they get to talk with their child for a time, or they get to see that, you know what, that didn't even happen. Like their child went on, they had a beautiful life, and they know the truth. You know that that's not what happened, but your nervous system goes, that feels a lot better to me. You always will know that you lost the child, but you're creating it in a way that feels calmer to you. And so that's what really people hang on to. It's not rewriting memories, it's not hypnosis, and it's not changing memories. And it's all voluntary. You get to choose what you want to do. And a lot of people, it is just seeing that again and getting your nervous system to look at it in a way that it doesn't get all jacked up. Because right when our body's hanging on to it and we rewatch that memory of what happened the first time, your body's feeling all sorts of things. You're reacting, you're crying. It's as if it's happening again. That's difficult. But once you see it that way, your brain goes, okay, now that we showed you the problem, it like releases what it's holding in your system. Your nervous system, you probably know from your experience, it just calms right down. And then when you look at that moment again, you have a completely different reaction to it. You can see details that you didn't see the first time. You see the positive, you see the support that you had, you see the precious moments that you had, because now the negative sensations are no longer muddying it up in a sense. And so that's what you do when you process these moments. You're paying attention to the parts that you want to and getting rid of the parts that are distressing.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my experience a little bit, because I definitely, what you're saying about having the power to rewrite the story a little bit felt absolutely impossible to me when I was at first exploring EMDR, but I had done years of talk therapy. I had tried all of these other things, and nothing was working. And so I found myself just at a point of desperation. And I laugh about it now because a big trigger for me back in the day was wind chimes. And it sounds silly, and it was definitely nothing I ever talked about out loud, but I would go around my neighborhood and take down my neighbors' wind chimes in the night. I mean, I was a crazy like wind chime bandit from my neighborhood because I couldn't stand the sound. It was such a triggering memory for me. And then when I realized how bad that was, I started to notice that just the wind touching my hair and my face was creating these panic attacks. And at that point, I was so desperate to get rid of that's what led me to EMDR. So I don't think I didn't walk in there thinking, yep, I'm so excited. I know this is going to work for me with certainty. I walked in out of complete desperation, to be honest. And I only was able to do a few sessions, but the two things that stand out to me are the exact moment you're talking about, the moment where you do reach the point in the memory where you get to rewrite it, and the ease with which my brain was able to do that in the moment when it felt so impossible just a few weeks before was incredible. And it's so empowering, I think, when you talk about loss and experiences so out of our control, gaining that power and control back was life-changing for me. And then the moment I realized it was a windy day and I was listening to a wind chime and it hadn't affected me at all, was the second life-changing moment of that therapy for me. And like I said, I think I did 7 sessions. And so while I'm saying it didn't heal everything for me, it made significant impact on the way that I processed a lot of big, hard memories in my life. And so I always like to share that one because I think people sometimes, we've said this a few times, just diminish their triggers and their experiences. And wind chime seems like a silly one, but it really was disrupting my life and my day, and I wouldn't go outside. And so it was huge for me, but I haven't experienced ART. So that one sounds incredible. That's the one that I know I stayed up till 2 a.m. talking to you about. I think we got kicked out of a hotel lobby. We got so deep into the conversation about it. But what advice would you give to our families who are just now hearing about this, maybe piquing interest in exploring the therapies and finding the right therapist for them, especially when we're talking about pregnancy and infant loss? Are there special credentials in that space? Are there trauma credentials we should be looking for? What advice would you have?
So my advice, and some people may agree or disagree, is that if you can, first of all, it has to be a good fit, right? So much that we know about therapeutic relationships, whether it's talk therapy or any of these other modalities we're talking about, is really that you have fit with the person who's doing it with you. You need to have that sense of trust. So I would say that's number one important. And if it takes 2 or 3 people before you figure out this is the right one for me, that's okay. Now, with that being said, not all clinicians are created equal. So I would look for somebody that when you ask them about their experience, that they have a pretty good amount of experience, with it. It's not to say that newbies can't do it, but if you're feeling very fragile and you're wanting somebody that you can feel comfortable with, just, ask them about their training. Are they certified? How many years have they been doing it? All that jazz. But really what you're going to want is it's trauma and it's loss. Whether they specifically have worked with a lot of infant loss or not, I wouldn't get hung up on that because, right, like we talked about earlier, loss is loss is loss. And so this is what these clinicians are dealing with all the time. It's not going to change the way that they bring you through it in the way that you might feel like you need it in talk therapy. In talk therapy, you might want somebody that can relate a little bit more to your experience. But when you're doing these therapies like EMDR and ART, it's all driven by you. We're just a guide. We're bringing you through the process. You're watching your memories. You're recreating these moments. You're processing. Whether or not we've had experience with that is going to play less into that than going through the process because it's all coming from you. So I always tell people, don't feel like you have to have that as something in the background of the clinician you're working with in order to feel like they're going to know how to work with you.
I appreciate you giving us some guidance in that on where to start, because I remember I had never heard about EMDR. I didn't know anybody who had gone through that type of therapy. So I didn't know what to expect when I walked in there. And I think the biggest thing that shocked me was how little I actually had to speak. I think because all of my past experience was with talk therapy, that I was very confused when I was just sitting there in silence, doing a lot of it in my own head and space, right? And so
Mhm.
walk us through, for somebody who's just never heard of this, what is an EMDR session like? What is an ART session like? Like walk us through the full experience.
Sure. So I'll start with ART. So when you come in for ART, typically, well, in both of them, you're going to do an assessment. You're going to meet with somebody and you're going to talk about what are your goals. And you're going to start talking about these are the moments that I'm stuck on, or these are the reactions I'm still having that are making it difficult for me to function. And in both processes, your clinician is going to figure out, okay, where is this coming from? What are the moments that still need to be processed? And so ART will pick a scene set. And by a scene, we mean when you say, I've lost my child, your brain automatically shows you a movie. And sometimes it's these like snippets, these 5 or 6, but they're these poignant moments that you're like, yep, that whole thing put together, that was my traumatic experience. And so in ART, you're going to process that experience. So you're going to go in and over that hour session, you're going to go back and forth from watching the movie, quote unquote, to processing your bodily sensations to it. And in that process, that's where the integration starts to happen.
Mm.
And once you've processed that, then you're going to choose voluntarily how you wish life had gone instead. How do you wish that day had gone instead? And then it brings you through a whole protocol. And then, like I said, by the end of that session, 60 to 90 minutes later, your clinician could say to you, tell me about the day that you lost your child. And you will be able to recount it, but your whole nervous system will respond differently. You'll still be sad, but you won't have that extreme level of sad that feels like border of a panic attack, or that I can't function, or I can't go on, or I can't even speak about it anymore. And that brings such lift and such relief to the person going through that experience. So that's what an ART session would look like. It's going to be very deliberate, very specific. And even by the end of the session, what's super cool, which I love about ART, is that when you get to the end of it and you say, share with me your journey, what happened, the person will tell you the details, but they'll see the new movie. They won't see those moments that were really distressing to them. They will see the new positive images that they want to retain. And that in itself is like, I can function again. Now I get to walk out and carry only the good with me.
I think
So
that's the
that's ART.
self-care element to me, that it's allowing
Yes.
ourselves peace and healing and just space to be,
Mhm.
right? I mean, to me, that's the redefinition of self-care that
Mhm.
these therapies allow us to have. So
Mhm.
what a gift. I can't even imagine from your perspective what that looks like and what that feels like every time you see somebody experience that
Ugh,
transformation.
I have the best job in the world. I say it
Yeah,
all the
that's
time. It's absolutely the best to see somebody come in with something so heavy and see them walk away and still be able to appreciate what they've been through, but not be under the distress of it anymore
mhm.
and to not be owned by it. It's like I talk with my clients a lot about this phraseology of it's an event that happened to you, but it doesn't own you anymore. And there's a big difference in that. When they walk into my office, they are owned by what is going on. Their body is running the show. They're in fight or flight mode. They are in survival all the time. They leave and they're not owned anymore. It's something they don't like that happened, but they now have agency again. They now can go out and they can be the person that they were again and function in the way that they were functioning before that huge event happened again, with
Yeah,
still being able to honor it.
I think to put it into no fit too small lingo, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but the first pillar of our mission is celebrate. Celebrate angels is how we say it.
Mm,
And so to me, the power of what we're talking about today is the gift of having the space to celebrate
mhm,
our children
absolutely.
and our angels. And so I just want to bring that full circle back to kind of what our mission is and what we're trying to do, because I think when we have bright colors and we make grief look and feel different intentionally, we do
Mhm,
that on purpose because I think society makes it feel dark and heavy, and we
mhm,
want to change that, and we want people to know that you can have these negative experiences and still celebrate and experience joy in life. And so again, I felt that through our conversation. That's why I wanted you to be here today. So I'm digressing, but I'd love to walk through the EMDR experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you're saying that, just to follow up that duality, that you can, like we said earlier, hold both of them. And in a sense, after you do that, you have permission to, right?
Mm.
Permission to say, oh, I can still experience joy while I still honor what happened, but not being owned by the heavy and the depression and the grief of what
Mm-hmm.
happened. That's a beautiful
Yeah.
way that you put it,
Yeah.
to
Thank you for that.
celebrate.
It's the control back. I think we feel so out of control with this type of loss in
Hmm.
particular. And
Hmm.
it's really allowing us to take some of that back, which is really
Yes.
the beauty in it, I think.
Absolutely. And so EMDR, which you're familiar with, that session looks different than the ART session because immediately we know that we're going to be doing more than one session. Now, sometimes it can be one, but for the most part, it's a little bit more than one. And you're spending a little bit more time with a typical traditionally trained clinician. I'll put that out there. Setting up history, what's gone on, finding if there's other moments in your life that might match to some of the feelings, even that came, from your loss. And there might be other losses earlier in your life that are feeding, right, this current experience that you just had. And then in that session, you're going to start noticing the memory or the most poignant moment that you're struggling with, or the feeling that you're feeling in your body, that you're struggling with throughout the day, just even that sensation of grief. And then you process that in a very different way. It's a lot of closing your eyes, letting your brain just go with that feeling and what's coming up for you. What are you noticing? And when you can even be in that space, it's amazing. The brain, it just goes tick, 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 and it's like making all these connections, but it's processing. And again, it's neutralizing the way that you feel, and it's helping you have understanding and integration of that memory set. And this can go on for an hour, and it could go on for 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions, or it could go on for 2 sessions. But it's very different in that the ART is very formulaic and protocol. Every step of the way, I am telling you what to do, what to look at, what to imagine, where to go, what to do. I know exactly in the protocol what's going to happen, what I need to happen, what I need to see, and when to end it. I can predict those so well. EMDR is not the same that way, and it's not good or bad. It's just different. EMDR, it's we're following your brain where it goes, and we might get through an hour and you've not had resolution about what we're addressing. There will be some relief because we're processing things, but it might not be the same sense of resolution because there's just more for your brain to process. And so we're going to have to stop that session. And then next week, you're going to come back and we're going to pick up where you left off again. We're going to see if there's been some change in your body's state with what it's struggling with when you come back for that next session and start processing again. Now, the beautiful thing about that is when you do EMDR and ART, your brain, it keeps processing these moments and these feelings after the session has ended. It goes on for weeks and months. Sometimes they say up to 3 months, 90 days, that your brain is still making sense of everything.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's why it's so important. Yeah, like you can do it. I'll have this happen all the time. Clients go, they leave, they come back. And maybe if we were to scale things, like when you think about the loss, where are you at? They'll say, oh, I'm at a 10 in my body. It feels super intense. And you'll get to the end of the session, an EMDR session, and you might say, how does that feel now? And they'll say, oh, it's like a 7. Okay, that's good. We went down. That's great. But then they'll come back the next week and you'll say, where are you at today when you kind of think about that moment and think about what's going on? And they'll be like, I'm at a 5. Okay, what's happened? Right? The brain has continued to process what happened in that last session, even after you left the session. So the EMDR, again, they're all going towards the same thing. It's integration, but it's just the way that the 2 modalities go about doing it. One's very protocol formulaic and directive, and the other one is a lot more free associative.
I appreciate the differences. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
help us understand, this is something I've never fully grasped. What is the role of the eyes? So EMDR is called eye movement desensitization. I think that is maybe a little bit confusing for those of us who don't have a neuroscience background or anything, but help us understand what is the role of the eye movement in that reprocessing?
Sure. So whether it's eye movement or whether it's tapping, or even some clinicians will use sounds, that go back and forth. So what is this? A couple things. One is it's taxing the working memory. There's something about when you tax the working memory and you call forward these traumatic memories, it makes it a little bit easier to tolerate what you're watching. The other is that we're having bilateral stimulation, which has both sides talking to each other, which is helping integrate the information as well. And the other thing is that just by its nature, bilateral stimulation, whether it's this or moving your eyes, it's calming. So you've got all these different reasons that when you do this, it helps you process information, right? So it's like when a lot of people get upset, you say, well, go for a walk. That's bilateral stimulation. And they magically go for the walk and they come back and they're like, oh, I just feel so much better. I'm not so sure why. Well, that's why, right? We're starting to have this bilateral stimulation that helps us to integrate and helps us to process what's going on while it's calming the nervous system, while it's getting both sides to talk to each other.
Oh, wow.
Now, eye movements specifically are really good at calming the nervous system. So a lot of times, if I'll even have people that are using, let's say, the electronic buzzers, the tappers, while they're recalling memories, if they get very dysregulated, I will have them open their eyes and I will move my hand back and forth like this for them to move their eyes back and forth to calm their system. It's that powerful that just by holding the tappers sometimes that's not enough, or just by imagining metaphorically or breathing, let's calm down. When you start getting those eyes back and forth, it's crazy what happens. Like you can be super jacked up and you're like, oh, just stay with me. Oh, here we go. Like watch my eyes, and you do it. And then you're like, how are you feeling? They're like, better. Right.
This might have to be something I start doing and ask people to start doing for me in my life. It's good advice.
Well, I would even do it with clients that would come in that are so nervous about starting the therapy. They'll be like, and everyone comes in and I'll always say, how do you feel? I know we're going to start this will be our first session. I know we're going to start looking at some really difficult things today. And they're like, oh, so nervous. Couldn't sleep last night. And I'm like, okay, human, normal, like, yay, you're with the rest of the crowd. No one comes in here and they're like, oh, I'm so chill, Laurel. This is going to be so easy. Can't wait to do it. Everyone comes in with some trepidation. I'm yet to meet somebody who doesn't, but I can sit them down there and say, okay, just notice all those feels, like what's happening in your body right now. And while you're doing that, I want you to just follow my hand, just with your eyes.
I'm doing it right now.
Right? And it's amazing. Then they'll be like, and I'm like, do you want to do that again? And it's so beautiful. And I talk to my clients about this a lot, even after the session. I'll say, when you start to notice, even if you're in a social situation and you're feeling stressed, go in the bathroom, find two corners on the wall, move your eyes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while you're doing that, imagine yourself being at a place that makes you feel super calm. And it's amazing. Just the system goes, we can breathe again. So yes, that's just one part of the eye movement. But yeah, it works on multiple levels. There's multiple reasons why it works.
Well, thanks for explaining that for me, because I've just never understood that piece of it. I know we're coming up on our time, but I want to take advantage of the fact that you are also a licensed marriage therapist. When we talk about pregnancy and infant loss, marriage is a huge added complexity to that grief experience, I think. And, we talked about a few different therapies today. I love that you put no priority or weight on any of them. It's just a recognition that some work for some people and others work for different groups of people. And you just have to find the one that resonates best with you. But, we often see with spouses that they go through loss differently and they process their loss differently, even within the same family and household. So I'm just curious, from the marriage therapist angle, what advice would you give to maybe our married partners that are trying to figure out and grieve and process together, but maybe need different therapies and different options? Maybe how to navigate those conversations and that process of identifying what works best for them individually while also doing that together.
This would be a whole nother maybe
podcast. Episode 2.
No. So a couple things now. I'll go with kind of the biggest ones. Number one, which is I tell people all the time when they come in that you are not your partner and your partner is not you. So the first most important part being recognizing that grief looks differently for both of you. In most marriages, we are a yin yang, right? Birds of a feather flocks together is not true when it comes to marriage. It's, opposites attract. So, and like, we know that you spend any time with any partner for an amount of time, they're like, it drives me crazy when my partner does thus and such a thing. I would never do it that way, right? And it's that same concept we need to take into our grieving process. I would never do it that way. You're right, you wouldn't, but they do. And so being able to get in this space that you can honor that our journeys are going to be completely different and that the way that they process, think about that. How have they been in our marriage up to this point? And are they being consistent with who they've shown me that they are? And if they are, then okay. That's how they grieve. And just because this moment seems really big for you and it feels like they're not doing it the right way or the way that you need or the way that you think they should, that doesn't make it right. And it doesn't that your way's right and their way's wrong. So I would say number one, just understanding that the grief is going to look very different for both partners. And then in that space, this phraseology is the most important, whether you're going through loss or anything in a marriage, which is this one question: what do you need from me right now? That's number one. And then turning it around. You saying to your partner, this is what I need from you right now. So when your partner is in a certain space and you're unclear what's happening, are they grieving? Are they not grieving? Should they? And they're not, right? Instead of judging, let's just go walk into that space and ask the question, honey, what do you need from me right now? And then we have to believe that what they say is their truth. We don't get to judge it. We don't get to decide, that can't really be it. I don't think that's what it is. We really need to honor what they've said and then do our best to provide that for them. And likewise, when we feel like they're not meeting our needs, we don't get to say, well, if they knew me well enough, they would know what I need now, right? We go to them and say, I'm really struggling today. Today's a hard day for me. I've been triggered a lot, or I was reminded of this. This is what I need right now. I need you to take the other kids and I need you to feed them dinner tonight. Or I need a walk right now. Can you handle things? Whatever it is. So using the phraseology of I need, so important. And then also be careful the meaning you attribute to your partner's behavior. So going back to where I started this by saying that the way that we grieve is completely different. The biggest mistake comes that when we look at our partner's behavior and we say, oh, because they did this, because they didn't talk to me about it today, because they didn't, honor the anniversary today, it means that they don't care. It means that they're over it. Oh, so dangerous. We should never make meaning without checking in with our partner that it's true or untrue. So in a moment like that, you might say, notice that you were very quiet today. To me, that makes me wonder where you're at. But what does that mean? Right? To get clarification. The meaning we attribute to our partner's behavior is usually what gets us in trouble if we don't go back to clarify that we gave it correct meaning. So that's where I would encourage marriages the most, is to be careful about meaning and to also ask so clearly for what you need and ask your partner for what they need. If you can do those two things, you're going to save yourself so much hidden grief and just even grief that's just out there, and the arguing and the conflict. It's huge.
Thank you for diving into that a little bit. I think those specific questions and the intentionality behind how we start those conversations is really allowing us all permission to heal and grieve and celebrate in our own unique way, which is really the goal, right? I mean, that's the goal of your therapies. That's the goal of self-care. That's the goal of kind of everything that we wanted to touch on today. So thank you for going that direction a little bit with me. I think it's important for a lot of our listeners.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to. Thanks for asking about it.
Yeah, of course. So I normally end our conversations by asking our guests, we have a lot of lost parents on, what they would say to their angel today. What I want to ask you is, what is the one thing you would give our listeners permission to tell themselves today?
I would say that they have permission to do this their way, to let their grief be their own unique story, and to not get caught up in the shoulds and to get caught up in what other people pressure you to look like or say where you should be at a certain point in time. But to give yourself the gift of saying, I am uniquely created, and my unique creation is a unique expression of my unique grief. And I have permission to show up however my body needs me to.
That's perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. Where can our listeners find you? I want to make sure that if they are interested in learning more about what we talked about today, that they have all of the resources they need. And we'll include it in our show notes, but I'd love for you to just let folks know the best ways to get in touch with you and learn more.
Sure. Well, you can go to my website, which is my name, laurelwears.com. And on there, it talks a little bit about the therapies I do. But you can also find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I hang out on LinkedIn more than anything for the most part. So you can look me up in any of those places.
perfect.
YouTube also. I'm starting to go on there.
Great. Okay. Well, you'll be on our YouTube channel too. So maybe
All right,
we can.
lovely.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you again so much for all of your time today, Laurel. We really appreciate it. And this was an extra special episode, I think, just for us to focus on self and healing and wellness. So thank you for the gift of your experience and expertise. We really are grateful.
Well, thank you for having me. I am so honored that I can share all of this. And I hope that even if just one person today feels like they have hope, that they can get some healing by doing something maybe a little bit different, then total win. So thank you.
Yeah, I have no doubt there's more than one person. So I hope you have some self-care and go eat some cake or have a drink or celebrate today. I know it's early morning, but later throughout the day. So enjoy the rest of the day, but we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much, Laurel.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the No Fit Too Small podcast. If you want to get in touch with Laurel and learn more about these therapies we covered today, we will include all of her information in the show notes. And if you are a family navigating pregnancy or infant loss, we would love to support you. So please connect with us at nofittoosmall.org. If you're interested in supporting the mission and just learning more, that's the place for you to go as well. Special shout out to Storyline Multimedia for helping us hold space for these important conversations. And we will catch you at the next episode.